Starting off with our top focus at this hour, Pakistan is cracking down on social media activists critical of the country's media, military and Islam. Reports from Islamabad said 13 people had been detained by the Federal Investigation Agency and were being questioned. Among those being targeted is WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui. Siddiqui had tweeted, and I quote here, "I feel I am being targeted for reporting about the army without self-censorship. Freedom of speech, not crime, but democratic right. I will not be silenced. I filed a petition against the FIA at Islamabad High Court. I am being intimidated through counter-terrorism department for performing duties as a journalist." That's the tweet put out by Taha Siddiqui. Taha receiving a call from someone claiming to be from the counter-terrorism department of the FIA. He demanded that Siddiqui present himself at the FIA office for interrogation. It appeared this was related to Siddiqui's professional work. Siddiqui refused, pointing out that his work was in the public domain and could easily be accessed by anybody. Taha Siddiqui has filed a writ petition in the High Court requesting that such calls and intimidation by the FIA should end. Let's open this up for discussion. We're now joined in on the broadcast by Ahmed Shaheen, senior journalist from Pakistan. Also joining us is WION's political editor Kartikeya Sharma and WION's correspondent Aliani Pagani. Coming to you first, Ahmed Shaheen, the kind of action that we're seeing being taken by the FIA, your initial reaction to that?
I mean, it's quite expected because in India and Pakistan, the hyper-nationalism on part of the people, the media and the state is becoming quite a serious issue. This is just one of those aftermaths of what you would expect of a hyper-nationalist state. It's something at the same level as the Jawaharlal Nehru universities. The state's reaction towards the students, one of the students got arrested. People are being questioned. If the hyper-nationalists in the country are not going to be happy, there will be arrests. They just want to show that they're taking care of the sacred and nationalist, image of the country, and the armed forces are as a vital part of it. It's perceived.
Kartikeya, according to you, what message does this really give out? This clamping down on social media freedom, on freedom of expression and speech.
See, there are two things here. In the case of the JNU, I would slightly differ because it became a criminal case, and the slogans were of the nature that India should be broken into 15 pieces. But my colleague Taha Siddiqui did not write anything of that sort, that the entity of Pakistan should not survive or cannot survive. My colleague Taha Siddiqui wrote a critical piece. It was a criticism. It was critical evaluation. He never said those things which are being, which for example happened in JNU. So in context of Taha and the sort of journalism he does, it's about independence.
Request you just hold that thought there, Kartikeya. Joined in on the broadcast by Taha Siddiqui, WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief himself. Taha, bring us up to speed with what's happening right now.
Well, I filed a petition at the Islamabad High Court, and it has been accepted for a hearing tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. And basically, the idea behind the petition is that I've been being harassed by the Federal Investigation Agency, and not just by the Federal Investigation Agency itself, the overall, but particularly by the Counterterrorism Department, who have been calling me and questioning me about my work and asking me to appear before them. And we do know that in the last few days, people who have gone after getting such calls have been detained and illegally detained rather, and no cases have been being filed against them, but there's sort of an intimidation against them. So right now, tomorrow, we're being asked to come at 8:30 in the morning and present our case, and we have made the FIA as a respondent, the person who called me from the Counter-Terrorism Department as one of the respondents in the case.
Taha, do you see yourself being targeted because of your professional duties as a journalist?
Definitely. I mean, the idea behind this these calls that have been happening, they have, I mean, when the person called me, he said that it had to do with what I had been doing and writing and reporting about. And particularly then I found out from other sources, it has a lot to do with military affairs in the country and talking about military affairs independently and not exercising self-censorship. This is not the first time that I've been contacted by officials. I mean, earlier they had done it informally through informal channels, through other friends, through journalistic fellow journalists, and who had basically told me that you had to exercise self-censorship, stop crossing the line. But at that time, I told them that it's my professional duty. Whatever I report and whatever I say is according to whatever is that out there. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. It's basically to talking about the military according to whatever is happening, and the military has a lot of presence in politics in Pakistan. The military has a lot of presence in other spheres of life in Pakistan. So it seems like now the military is using the Federal Investigation Agency and that too their counter-terrorism department to target me, to silence me in a way.
And this is, of course, a design strategy, Taha. This is not the first time, but definitely a string of incidents where this strategy is adopted by the regime to actually clamp down on criticism, try and silence criticism of the country's media, military, or even Islam.
I mean, definitely, Pakistan is considered one of the most dangerous countries for journalists working here. We've since 9/11, 2001, when Pakistan became sort of the front ally of war on terror, journalists have been in the middle of things where they have been reporting independently about military issues from the tribal areas, from the Taliban control areas. And basically, from what we see, that I mean, there have been over 100 journalists that have been killed. Number of journalists who have left the country, many have been abducted, tortured. So all of that, given all of that context, that is why I have approached the courts for some relief, asking for some relief from the court, saying that, I have every right to report the way I report, and it's constitutionally guaranteed. Its freedom of speech is constitutionally guaranteed in Pakistan. So I should be able to exercise my right.
Also, what's even more grave here is that we're looking at as many as 13 people this time around being detained by the FIA. If you can confirm that for us, and who are these 13 individuals?
Well, I'm the only journalist on that list. Other than that, they're usually social media activists and political activists who have been critically talking about the military, specifically the military. Then there are some people who are being detained for, criticizing the judiciary, allegedly criticizing the judiciary. And then some people are also being blamed for posting blasphemous content online. So there's an investigation going on, but the FIA, the Federal Investigation Agency, and the counter-terrorism wing of the FIA has not come forth with why this is happening. I mean, what are the charges? What is the law that they're being charged under? It's more of like they're just going out there, picking up people and detaining them, or asking people to come over to the headquarters and then detaining them, and not really explaining how the law has been broken. Because from a legal point of view, I've been talking to lawyers in my particular case also. There has been no law broken as such.
Absolutely no law broken as such, Taha. And also, what have we been told so far? You have been asked to appear tomorrow as well again?
Tomorrow, basically, now that I've sought relief from the court, so I'm going to be going to the court. I have declined to appear before the Federal Investigation Agency, saying that they have no right to call me, and I want them to respond in the courts as to why they have asked me to come, and why. I mean, the call that they made to me, and then they sent a message through some other friends, fellow journalists, saying that Taha has to appear before us and he has to answer some questions. So all of that, given all of that, I had to approach the courts and ask the courts to intervene. So tomorrow morning, the courts have asked me and my lawyer to present ourselves before the court and explain our situation. and then I've asked the Federal Investigation Agency to be a respondent and explain their situation as to why they're intimidating and harassing a journalist.
Absolutely. We're going to leave it there at this point, Taha. We will, of course, keep coming back to you for the latest on what's really happening there. If I can come to you, Daniele, at this point, this is, as we've been discussing, a designed strategy on part of the Pakistan regime to try and clamp down, to try and silence criticism when it comes to the military, when it comes to the government.
Yes, well, obviously. So first of all, I would like to extend my full solidarity to Taha Siddiqui and to all the journalists on the ground who are facing the same problematics. We need to be very clear. We will not let this story fall into a dark corner, so we will keep track on that. Yes, I think this is a strategy that the Pakistani government is doing right now. They probably are failing because Taha Siddiqui in this case, and we do not know about the other 12 who are being summoned to court together with him, did not break any law. He just reported, and this is a matter of trying to suppress criticism, and this is a major problem, but this is not new.
Yes.
Let me just let's help our viewers to understand what is our job on the ground sometimes. If you're an independent journalist, you will kind of occur in this kind of problem repeatedly in your career, and unfortunately there are places like Pakistan in this moment where it is very dangerous because abductions and kidnaps made by government agencies is well documented and is there on the media and on reports. So it is very crucial that journalists defend themselves by going public, and it is very important that they file petition exactly as Taha Siddiqui said. Obviously the Pakistani government right now has problems. I would probably also add that the fact that Taha Siddiqui is working for WION, which is an international channel but based out of India, might played a role in this harsh way of harassing him. But this is just one thought that I have, and I have no evidence to say this.
Sure, absolutely, Karthik. If I come to you on this, as Taha's petition also points out, it is a fundamental right of him as a journalist being violated.
See, there's a difference in context. For example, Pakistan, despite the fact that it has elections, is not a fully democratic state.
Yes.
Elections is a procedure from where the democracy starts. It's not the end. Now, Pakistan is also run by the army. Look at what happened to the journalist Almeida once he wrote that report.
Yes.
This relationship between the deep state, which is army, and the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif completely got strained. And in any other democracy, leaks are part of journalism. Sometimes you leak things, sometimes you don't leak things. But that leak costed Mr. Sharif so much. It costed that minister his job, that person his job. So, this is also about the fact that the army plays a role in Pakistan.
Yes.
And it can be far more intimidating. For example, you can write a story in India against a minister, but no one from Intelligence Bureau or RAW or any other agency will call you unless and until the matter becomes sub judice and you are sent to court. Yes, there is social media trolling in India. There is no doubt. I agree that the trolling takes place in India, and it's and especially when it comes to women and working women, and it's becomes vulgar and obscene. But there is a difference. Army does not control democratic processes, and journalists here.
I can quickly go across to Ahmed Shaheen on this. Do you agree with that? And also, this of course is not an isolated incident, but could be just the tip of the iceberg when we are looking at a string of such incidents taking place.
Yes, more or less, I do agree with the notion that compared to India and Pakistan, the military's role has always been there in the politics, has always gotten itself involved in politics, in the media houses, directly dealing with journalists. There have been very senior journalists who have also come out and said, yes, we were working for one of the branches of the military. Yes, this is a given scenario in Pakistan. So in terms of the case with Taha Siddiqui, I think the background of this whole issue is that it's not just, out of the blue the government started, or it's not the court summoning them, it's the FIA, which is one part of the government, of the executive. So the FIA is summoning them, but there's a background to how they set up the whole thing for that. They have been advertising in the newspapers. We receive SMS using those public SMS services, that if you see some blasphemous thing or if you see anything anti-national, report it to us. So they are trying to show their efficiency to the hyper-nationalist vote bank and the people who support hyper-nationalism in Pakistan. So this is just to show them the efficiency of, hey, we're taking care of the people who are supposedly the enemies of the state. And many of the journalists, the liberal left journalists, fall into that category as well.
And Daniela, in a country like Pakistan, as we've been discussing, the confrontation that we've seen between the military and the civilian government, in that dynamics, it becomes all the more crucial for a journalist security to be safeguarded.
Absolutely, absolutely. It becomes crucial that, and how to safeguard it is going public. A journalist needs to be publicly exposing whatever he's exposing. That's the only protection that a journalist can have in a zone which is right now very dangerous. And not only it becomes important for him to protect himself, but it is important also that he keeps doing his job, because it is exactly when these kind of things are happening that you're touching the crucial nerves of the society, which a government or a military would not want you to touch. So that's our job. So again,
Karthik wants to come in here.
You see, I'm just pointing out to the difference, because Daniel and Taha and our esteemed guest has touched upon other points with you.
Yes.
See, the difference here in India and Pakistan is that in India, in context of journalists being on the other side of the violence, if you are covering Naxalism, if you are covering, for example, say Kashmir or Northeast, the only thing which gets denied in the process is excess. The excess gets denied. You are not called to be, questioned by the military authorities or the police. That's one thing. Secondly, the problem when we talk about violence in journalism also exists in India. For example, you have a context of RTI.
Yes.
But then the violence is to be located between the journalist as a participant and civil society as an actor.
Yes.
But in Pakistan, it becomes a discourse between journalists and the state. And that is why you have those killings taking place, journalists disappearing. In India, what happens is, your access gets blocked.
Yes.
You are not given that privileged information, or you're not given access to that geography, or litigation might happen. The government might go to the court. But the disappearance does not take place. Or if we contextualize the RTI issue, those are in the realm of culture and civil society and the journalists, not the state. So the primary difference here is that state plays a role. And I think we should empower voices like Taha Siddiqui in Pakistan and our esteemed guests, so that such vibrant democratic voices exist in Pakistan.
Ahmed Shaheen, but considering that this is not a fresh incident, this is not an isolated incident, incidents like these taking place in the past with other journalists as well, as you would be aware of and you would be knowing most of them as well, how many of them have actually gone public with the kind of harassment that they've been facing?
Most of the high-profile cases that were public by virtue of Hamid Mir, one of the most esteemed journalists in Pakistan, when they tried to kill him, it became very public and it became a big controversy for us, for the channel I work for. There was an attack on me about, I think, over a month ago, and I did not go public with it. Rather, I just contacted the institution. They arrested their people and they reprimanded them. My only request to them was to let me know what they did, what was the punishment they got. I've never been told what punishment they got. They've just been punished, is what officially is being told to me. These are the things that we don't raise in the media, because the media itself is hyper-nationalist. If you have Arnab Goswami's there, you have Amir Liakats over here, people who come on screen and who target media personalities and institutes and accuse us of being traitors and of blasphemers. So, this is the kind of balance we have to toe. Even we're under attack from the hyper-nationalists of the media industry itself. Some of the major TV channels or competitors are regularly accusing of being anti-national. So they also put a lot of pressure on the civilian government to not only take actions against the journalists, but also sack their own people. You mentioned the Minister Pervez Rashid, Minister for Information and Broadcast. He had to go home for officially what they said was not being able to stop a report.
Absolutely, and Ahmed Shaheen, as we've been discussing, this could be just the tip of the iceberg, and we are looking at this in the larger context. Has the situation worsened, would you say, over the last few months?
Yes, in terms of religious intolerance and anti-Pakistan intolerance, anything that is perceived to be anti-Pakistan, be it criticism of the former military regimes that abrogated the constitution and killed elected prime minister or anything like that. I mean, the whole idea of the sacred cow is being enshrined in the common person's mindset because of this infiltration of pro-military media people in the media industry. So yes, it's becoming heightened amongst the masses, and that dictates the kind of action that is warranted by the government and by the civilian government in this case. And the civilian government has to show that it's doing something, and this is all a part of that. If there's more pressure, the civilian government would probably want to arrest people to show that they're doing something about it. If there's less pressure, they'll just do this, a little slap on the wrist for people like Taha Siddiqui, harass them a bit. I mean, there are defamation laws in Pakistan. If you're a journalist, if you think is defaming an institution or a person, you can just take them to the court. There is no need to harass them the way they're harassing Taha, and they will be doing it to other journalists as well, whether or not we raise our voice against it.
And the harassment, perhaps in the past, has worked in their favor.
Sorry, what was the question again?
The harassment, of course, with some of those journalists, as you're pointing out, has worked in their favor.
It does. Harassment does work. I mean, self-censorship is one of the best ways harassment works. A lot of my fellow journalists laugh, at other fellow journalists when they're doing their work, thinking, these people are crazy. And they observe a lot of self-censorship. Whatever we consider as crazy has been done by others, and they've gotten away with it. Most of the time, it's us ourselves as journalists who are stopping ourselves from speaking about a certain issue and, thinking, oh, it's not worth it talking about. It becomes a norm. Self-censorship becomes a norm because of harassment.
Self-censorship becomes a norm because of harassment. Danielle, as we've been discussing, journalists choosing to speak out against the harassment. But as Ahmed Shaheen also pointed out, a lot of them do not, because given the kind of pressure, the kind of subversion, especially in a country like Pakistan, as we've been discussing, that perhaps is not a choice that they have.
Very much true. In the sense that it needs a good dose of courage and bravery in order to speak out, knowing that the possible outcome is being kidnapped or that someone turns out at your door at a certain time in the night and something could happen. This is not something which we invent. This has happened many times. Now we are talking about Pakistan, but there are many other places in the world where journalists are facing these problems. One that comes into my mind directly right now, which is also pretty close to Pakistan, is Turkey, for instance, when this is happening on daily basis. And I also agree that self-censorship is the most effective kind of censorship that exists, because one thing is if a media outlet or a government or an institution directly approaches a journalist requesting him to shut up or to pull down a story or to stop putting his or her nose where they don't want to. The other thing is doing actions throughout the years which will instill inside the journalist's mind the knowledge of what could happen if he or she continues on that path. Therefore, often, and unfortunately, especially in countries like Pakistan, journalists do refrain themselves about talking about different issues. I'm not saying that this is not happening to a certain extent, also in democratic countries like Europe or like in India for that matter, that also is happening.
Absolutely. Closing remarks, Karthik, we're completely out of time.
The bottom line is that this is a case where WION's journalist, our bureau chief in Islamabad, is paying the price for writing the truth.
Yes.
And to put it on record, it's not as if he has broken certain red lines of journalism, because obviously, journalism also operates within the sovereign laws of a country.
Absolutely.
And those sovereign laws are important. Their sovereign laws are there in America, sovereign laws are there in India, sovereign laws are there in Pakistan. He did not break any of those sovereign laws. That has to be put on record. But what this constitutes is a harassment for saying what he feels about certain issues.
And as we noticed in the past, as Ahmed Shaheen, our esteemed guest, was also pointing out, that self-censorship becomes important when we're talking about harassment taking place in the past as well. Let's leave it there for the moment. Ahmed Shaheen, Karthik Sharma and Daniel Pagani, appreciate you joining us on the broadcast. This, of course, remains our top focus. Taha Siddiqui, the kind of pressure that's being put on a working journalist, WION's Pakistan bureau chief. He has, of course, filed a writ petition. This amounts to harassment. We will keep closely tracking further reactions also coming in this regard. With that, we're taking a short breather.